I am Jason Reynolds, 32 years old, and a senior software engineer in Seattle. Throughout my life, I was always the responsible one in our family, the person everyone turned to when things went wrong. I never imagined my own parents would betray my trust so completely by stealing $35,000 from my savings for a luxury cruise they called a family vacation, but never intended to include me on. The shock and pain of discovering their theft pushed me to a breaking point I never thought I would reach. If you have ever felt used by the people who should love you most, drop a comment about where you are watching from, hit that like and subscribe button to join others who understand that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with any 172. Family. My childhood in Portland was typical on the surface. We lived in a modest two-story house in a middle-class neighborhood with well-kept lawns and weekend barbecues. My father, Philip, worked as a sales manager for a local furniture company, while my mother, Martha, taught third grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from our home. My older sister, Natalie, and I shared a bathroom and fought over the television remote like most siblings. To neighbors and friends, we appeared to be the picture-perfect American family. Behind closed doors, the reality was quite different. From my earliest memories, money was a constant source of tension. Bill collectors called regularly. My parents spoke in hushed, angry tones late at night about credit card statements. The electricity was shut off twice when I was in elementary school. My mother explained it away as a misunderstanding with the power company, but even at 8 years old, I sensed the truth. Natalie bore the brunt of our parents' financial chaos during her high school years. She worked 2 part-time jobs while maintaining her grades, only to have our father regularly ask to borrow her paychecks for what he called temporary family emergencies. The money was never repaid. The day after her 18th birthday, Natalie moved in with her best friend's family. By the time she left for college across the country, she had already begun limiting contact with our parents. At the time, I thought she was being cold and selfish. Years later, I would understand she was protecting herself. With Natalie gone, I became the new target. At 15, I got my first job stocking shelves at a local grocery store. My plan was to save for a used car. Within 2 months, my mother asked if I could help with the mortgage just this once. $300 from my savings account disappeared. It was the first of countless financial impositions. Despite working 20 hours a week throughout high school, I never managed to save enough for that car. Somehow, there was always another family crisis that required my contribution. Our refrigerator died. The property taxes were higher than expected. Dad needed new tires for his commute. Each request was framed as temporary, exceptional, and absolutely necessary. When I received a partial scholarship to study computer science at Washington State University, I was determined to become financially independent. I worked at the campus IT help desk, delivered pizzas on weekends, and took summer construction jobs to cover tuition and living expenses. During my sophomore year, my parents called with panic in their voices. The roof was leaking badly, and they needed $3,000 for repairs before the rainy season caused serious structural damage. $3,000 represented nearly all my savings, but the thought of my childhood home developing toxic mold or collapsing ceilings was too much to bear. I transferred the money immediately. 6 months later, during a weekend visit home, I noticed the roof remained unchanged. When I asked about the repairs, my father vaguely mentioned reprioritizing the home improvement projects and changing their minds about the roof. The new 60-inch television and leather sectional sofa in our living room suggested where at least some of my money had actually gone. This pattern continued through my college years. Each semester brought new parental emergencies, medical bills, car repairs, property taxes. Each time I would scrape together whatever I could, often taking on additional shifts or eating ramen for weeks to help them out of their latest crisis. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a tech company in Portland. My starting salary felt enormous compared to my student budget. For the first time, I could afford a decent apartment, reliable transportation, and regular meals that did not come in styrofoam containers. I also began repaying my student loans, determined to start adulthood on solid financial footing. My parents' requests escalated proportionally with my income. Now they needed help with credit card debt, dental work, and home renovations. When I expressed concern about the frequency of these emergencies, they reminded me of all they had sacrificed to raise me. my mother tearfully recalled forgoing new clothes for years to afford my school supplies. My father mentioned postponing retirement to help with my education, though, in reality, my scholarship and jobs had covered most costs. 2 years into my career, I met Rebecca at a friend's housewarming party. She worked as a pediatric physical therapist with a warmth and steadiness that immediately drew me to her. As our relationship deepened, I gradually shared the complicated financial dynamic with my parents. Rebecca listened without judgment, but asked questions that gently challenged the arrangements I had come to accept as normal. "Do your parents have a budget?" she asked one evening, after I mentioned sending them $800 for a water heater replacement. "I think so," I replied, though I realized I had never actually seen evidence of any financial planning on their part. "And this is the third major home repair this year, right? Have they looked into home warranty options?" Her questions were reasonable, but they made me uncomfortable. They forced me to confront the growing suspicion that my parents' financial emergencies were largely self-created through poor planning and impulsive spending rather than genuine misfortune. They did their best raising me, I would defend them. They were always there when I needed emotional support. Rebecca would nod understandingly. "You can appreciate what they did right while still acknowledging patterns that are harmful now. Those things can both be true." She was right, but breaking free from established family dynamics proved more difficult than I had imagined. The constant requests had become our primary mode of interaction. Without financial crises to solve, I barely knew how to relate to my parents as an adult. My career advancement came quickly. 3 years after graduation, I was recruited by a major tech company in Seattle, offering nearly double my Portland salary. The position as senior software engineer represented everything I had worked toward professionally. Rebecca supported the move completely, and we planned for her to join me after finishing her contract at the Children's Hospital in Portland. I found a spacious one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, with large windows, and a view of the Space Needle in the distance. For the first time in my life, I felt I was truly getting ahead financially. I opened a high-yield savings account and set up automatic transfers to build my emergency fund. I increased my 401 Kelvin contributions. I began researching first-time homebuyer programs, dreaming of eventually owning property in my new city. Within 2 weeks of my relocation, my parents called to congratulate me on the big salary upgrade, though I had been deliberately vague about the specific numbers. My father casually mentioned they were a little short on their property tax payment due to some unexpected expenses. Could I help them out with $2,000? Just until next month, of course. I sent the money. Next month became next season, then next year. The requests never stopped, they simply grew larger. Medical procedures not covered by insurance. Essential home repairs. A replacement vehicle when my father's car was supposedly totaled in an accident, though I never saw documentation. To simplify the constant requests, I eventually set up an automatic monthly transfer of $1,500 to my parents' checking account. I reasoned this would help them budget and reduce the emotional drain of responding to crisis after crisis. Instead, it merely established a baseline expectation. The regular transfers did not replace the emergency requests. They supplemented them. During this period, my parents' lifestyle showed subtle improvements. My mother began posting photos on social media from restaurants several times a week. My father mentioned joining a golf club with reasonable senior rates. Their Christmas cards showed them standing proudly beside a new SUV. Yet their calls and texts about financial shortfalls never diminished. 6 months after my move to Seattle, Rebecca joined me, having secured a position at a respected pediatric clinic. As we settled into our life together, she expressed increasing concern about my financial relationship with my parents. "Jason, we need to talk about the money you are sending to your parents," she said, one Sunday morning, as we sat with coffee on our small balcony. "I noticed last month you sent them almost $4,000 total." I felt a familiar defensiveness rise in my chest. They had that plumbing emergency, and then Dad needed the specialist appointment. Rebecca set down her mug. "I understand wanting to help your parents, but $4,000 is more than most people's mortgage payments, and it happens every month in some form. Meanwhile, you stress about saving for our future together." She was right. Despite my substantial income, my savings grew at a glacial pace due to the constant outflow to my parents. I had begun charging some of their emergencies to my credit cards when they fell between pay periods. Maybe we should meet with a financial advisor, Rebecca suggested, just to get an objective perspective on what is sustainable. Marcus, the financial advisor we found through a colleague's recommendation, reviewed our finances with professional neutrality. When we reached the section on family support, his eyebrows rose slightly. "I see you are transferring approximately $30,000 annually to your parents," he noted. "Is this temporary assistance or an ongoing commitment?" Put in those terms, the amount shocked even me. $30,000 each year, with no end in sight. "That is a significant portion of your income," Marcus continued, when I did not immediately respond. "It affects not only your current financial health, but your long-term goals, like home ownership, retirement planning, and potential future expenses, like children's education." He asked if my parents had retirement savings, whether they had explored government assistance programs, or if they had considered downsizing their home now that they were empty nesters. I had no answers. These basic financial planning discussions had never occurred because each interaction revolved around the immediate crisis at hand. Financial boundaries are important in every relationship, Marcus advised. They protect both parties. Without them, patterns of dependency can develop that ultimately harm everyone involved. His words echoed in my mind over the following weeks. I began researching financial abuse, a term I had previously associated only with romantic relationships. The patterns described in the articles and forums I found matched my situation with disturbing accuracy. The manufactured emergencies, the guilt tactics, the escalation of requests, the lack of accountability, the lifestyle inconsistent with claimed financial hardship. I decided to attempt establishing boundaries. The next time my father called asking for $3,000 to replace their water-damaged carpet, I took a deep breath and responded differently. "Dad, I cannot send money this time. My own expenses in Seattle are higher than expected, and I need to build my savings." The reaction was immediate and intense. My father's voice hardened. "We would not ask if it was not absolutely necessary. Your mother will be heartbroken that her own son refuses to help when we have given everything for you." My mother called an hour later sobbing about how they would lose their homeowner's insurance if they did not make the repairs immediately. My sister Natalie was unreachable as usual, so they had no one else to turn to. What kind of son would leave his parents living with dangerous mold and damaged floors? I relented and sent $1,500, a compromised amount that satisfied neither of us. But the brief resistance had revealed the manipulative tactics they employed so effectively. The guilt, the catastrophizing, the emotional blackmail. Later that month, I attended a family reunion organized by my mother's brother in Spokane. Rebecca came with me, her first time meeting most of my extended family. During a conversation with my Aunt Linda, I mentioned helping my parents with some recent home repairs. "Home repairs?" she asked, looking confused. "But they just had that gorgeous kitchen renovation done last spring. Custom cabinets, granite countertops, the works. Your mother showed me all the photos." I had known nothing about any kitchen renovation. According to my parents, they were still using the outdated appliances and laminate countertops from my childhood. The $1,500 I had sent for emergency carpet replacement would have barely covered the cost of the high-end refrigerator visible in the background of my mother's recent Facebook photos. The revelation sparked the first major argument I had ever had with my parents about money. When confronted, they claimed the renovation had been necessary for the home's value and financed through a home equity line of credit. The carpet emergency had been real. They insisted, though they had found a more economical solution after receiving my money. The circular conversations left me exhausted and them offended that I would question their integrity. For several weeks afterward, our communication became minimal. I reduced the monthly transfer to $500, claiming increased expenses in Seattle. They responded with cool civility in texts and brief phone calls. But the distance did not last long. Soon a new crisis emerged, and the pattern resumed, though I maintained the lower monthly transfer amount despite their frequent hints about the inadequacy of my support. As Rebecca and I approached our 2-year anniversary, our relationship deepened into discussions of marriage. When I proposed during a weekend trip to Mount Rainier, her joyful acceptance filled me with a sense of rightness and purpose. We began planning a wedding for the following spring, A small, meaningful ceremony followed by a celebration with our closest friends and family. Our financial discussions took on new significance as we contemplated joining our lives completely. We opened a joint savings account specifically for wedding expenses and a future home down payment. Each month, we both transferred portions of our income into this shared future. My parents' reaction to our engagement was enthusiastic on the surface. My mother immediately began sending wedding venue ideas far beyond our planned budget. My father spoke of his expectation to give a memorable toast as father of the groom. Yet underlying their congratulations was a new persistent interest in our financial arrangements. "Have you combined all your accounts yet?" my mother asked during a video call, attempting to sound casual. "Are you keeping your condo in Portland as a rental property?" my father inquired, referring to Rebecca's former residence, which she had actually sold months earlier. "Which bank do you use for your savings?" "We are thinking of switching ours," they asked on another call. At the time, I attributed their questions to a clumsy attempt at financial planning inspired by our upcoming marriage. Perhaps they were finally taking an interest in organizing their own affairs after seeing us plan responsibly for our future. During a brief visit to Portland, 3 months before our wedding, my parents' computer stopped working. My father asked if I could help set up their new laptop and transfer their files. While assisting them, they mentioned having trouble accessing some of their online accounts. "Could you just write down your banking passwords for us?" my mother suggested. "Just in case of emergency. If something happened to you, we would need access." The request made me uncomfortable, but their reasoning played on my deepest fears and sense of responsibility. I hesitantly wrote down the password to our joint savings account, emphasizing it was only for genuine emergencies. 3 weeks later, I logged into our account to transfer our catering deposit and froze at the balance displayed. Instead of the $38,000 we had saved, the account showed a balance of $3,246. Nearly $35,000 had vanished. My first thought was identity theft or a bank error. Heart-pounding, I called Rebecca at work. "The wedding savings are gone," I told her, voice shaking. "Almost all of it." Rebecca rushed home, and together we contacted the bank to report the suspicious activity. The customer service representative placed us on hold while she investigated the transactions. "I see several withdrawals made over the past 2 weeks," she explained when she returned to the line. "They appear to have been made using your correct login credentials, and they passed all security verifications." The largest was a transfer of $28,000 to an external account at Pacific Northwest Credit Union. My stomach dropped. My parents had their accounts at Pacific Northwest Credit Union. "Can you tell me who authorized these withdrawals?" I asked already, knowing the answer. "The log shows they were made by someone using your online credentials, and there were no failed login attempts." "Do you think someone had access to your password?" Rebecca looked at me, realization dawning in her eyes. "Jason, did you give your parents our password when you were helping with their computer?" The bank initiated a fraud investigation, but I already knew what they would find. After disconnecting the call, I immediately phoned my parents. When my mother answered with her usual cheerful greeting, I cut straight to the point. $35,000 is missing from our savings account. Do you know anything about that? A moment of silence followed, then my father's voice came on the line. They had apparently put me on speaker. "We were going to discuss this with you next week," he said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than apologetic. We needed to secure bookings before prices increased. Bookings for what I demanded, though a sick feeling told me I already knew. "The Mediterranean cruise," my mother chimed in, her voice animated. 3 weeks visiting Italy, Greece, and Spain. We have been planning it for ages, and the opportunity finally presented itself. The group rate required booking at least 6 cabins together. "You took our wedding money for a cruise." My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "It is a family celebration," my father explained. "Your Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan are coming. So are the Andersons from church and the Millers from the neighborhood." "And us," I said. "You booked Rebecca and me on this cruise too." Another pause. "Well, no," my mother finally admitted. "We know you are busy with the wedding. This cruise is for the older folks to enjoy. You young people have plenty of time for travel later." The reality crashed down on me. My parents had stolen $35,000 from our wedding fund to treat themselves and their friends to a luxury cruise they had been planning for ages. They had not intended to include us on this family celebration, despite using our money to pay for it. "Do you understand you have stolen from us?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You took money we saved for our wedding and home without permission. That is theft." "Do not be so dramatic," my father replied dismissively. "Parents and children share resources. We raised you for 18 years, paid for your food, shelter, education. Consider this a small repayment." "You did not pay for my education," I responded automatically. "I worked and had scholarships." "Details," my mother said, with an audible wave in her voice. "Family helps family. You have that big tech salary. You can easily replace the money before your wedding." The conversation deteriorated further. They had spent $11,800 per person for the luxury cruise package, 6 people in total. The remaining funds had gone toward airfare, travel insurance, and shore excursions. They had effectively stolen our entire wedding budget and a significant portion of our house down payment to treat themselves and their friends to a lavish vacation while marketing it to everyone as their generous treat. When I expressed my shock and sense of betrayal, they responded with indignation that I would react so selfishly. After all they had done for me throughout my life, how could I begrudge them one special experience in their retirement years? Never mind that my father was still years from actual retirement age, and they had used stolen money rather than their own resources. Rebecca, listening to the conversation on speaker, finally intervened when my parents began suggesting we simply postpone our wedding until we could save more money. "You have committed theft and fraud," she stated clearly. "We will be contacting the police and pursuing this legally if the money is not returned immediately." My parents scoffed at the threat. No son would send his parents to jail over a simple misunderstanding about shared family resources, my father declared confidently. After ending the call, Rebecca and I sat in stunned silence. Our wedding was 3 months away. Deposits had been paid to vendors. Invitations were ready to mail. And our savings had been converted into someone else's vacation. "We need to talk to a lawyer," Rebecca finally said. "This crosses every line, Jason. This is not a misunderstanding or poor boundaries. This is calculated theft." The next morning, we met with Andrea Simmons, a family law attorney who specialized in financial abuse cases. She listened to our story with a grim expression, taking detailed notes. "Unfortunately, this situation is more common than you might think," she told us. "The fact that you provided the password complicates things from a criminal perspective, but we have several civil options to pursue recovery." Andrea outlined our legal recourse, while I sat in a fog of disbelief. How had my relationship with my parents devolved to the point where I needed legal protection from them? The weight of years of financial manipulation came crashing down, and I finally saw the pattern for what it was: systematic exploitation, disguised as family obligation. That night I barely slept. Images of my parents laughing on a luxury cruise ship paid for with our wedding funds kept flashing through my mind. The casual way they had dismissed our distress. The entitlement in their voices, when they suggested we simply postpone our wedding to accommodate their theft. "You do not owe them this," Rebecca whispered, as we lay awake at 3 a.m. "You do not owe anyone the right to steal from you, no matter what they did for you, as a child." The next day, I called my sister Natalie for the first time in nearly a year. Our relationship had been distant since she left home, connected only through occasional text messages and obligatory holiday calls. She answered on the 4th ring, surprise evident in her voice. "Jason, is everything okay?" I found myself pouring out the entire story, the years of financial requests, the escalating demands, and finally the theft of our wedding savings. Instead of the shock I expected, Natalie's response was calm, almost resigned. "I have been waiting for you to see it," she said quietly. "They did the same to me before I left, though, on a smaller scale. It is why I moved out the day I turned 18. It is why I changed my phone number 3 times in college. It is why I live 3,000 miles away and come home only for funerals." "Why did not you warn me?" I asked, hurt, that she had left me to discover the pattern alone. "I tried early on. You accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. After that, I figured you would have to see it for yourself." Her voice softened. "I am sorry they took your wedding money, Jason. But I am not sorry you finally see them clearly." That afternoon, I had my first appointment with Dr. Lambert, a therapist specializing in family trauma. She helped me frame what I had experienced in clinical terms: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, parentification. The labels helped somehow placing my experience within a recognized pattern rather than a unique family failing. "Your parents created a reverse financial dependency," Dr. Lambert explained. "In healthy families, parents support children until they can support themselves. In your case, that relationship was inverted early on. You became the provider, and they became financially dependent on you while still maintaining psychological authority as parents. It is a particularly difficult dynamic to escape." As the initial shock faded, a cold anger took its place. Rebecca and I spent the weekend adjusting our wedding plans, scaling back where possible, and extending our timeline by 2 months to allow for rebuilding our savings. But the sense of violation remained intense. "I keep thinking about them on that cruise," I told Rebecca as we revised our budget at the kitchen table, using our money to play the generous hosts to their friends. Everyone thinking how wonderful and successful they must be to treat their friends to such a luxury. While we put deposits down on a cheaper venue and cut our guest list in half, Rebecca added the unfairness of it all, evident in her voice. That evening, my father sent a group text to several family members about the upcoming Reynolds family Mediterranean adventure, including details about the ship's amenities and a link to the cruise line's website. He had not removed me from the group message, either forgetting or not caring that I would see their continued excitement about the trip purchased with our stolen savings. Something inside me shifted. I had spent my life being the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who helped fix everyone else's problems. For once, I wanted to be the one who said no, who enforced consequences rather than absorbing them. I wonder if they have actually paid for the entire cruise. Yet I mused aloud to Rebecca. They only took the money 3 weeks ago. Rebecca looked up from her laptop. "What are you thinking?" "Most cruise lines have a payment schedule. There is an initial deposit, then final payment closer to the sailing date." I opened my laptop and began searching for the payment policies of the cruise line my father had mentioned in his text. According to the website, final payment for Mediterranean cruises was due 60 days before sailing. My parents had scheduled their departure for September, just over 2 months away. There was a good chance they had paid deposits, but not the full amount. Even if they have paid in full, most cruise bookings can be canceled with partial refunds until 30 days before sailing. I noted, scanning the terms and conditions page. Rebecca watched me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What exactly are you planning, Jason?" "I am going to cancel their cruise," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. "If they have not paid in full yet, I might be able to recover most of our money." "Can you even do that?" "Would not. They need to be the ones to cancel, since they made the booking." I thought about the numerous times I had helped my parents with online accounts, travel bookings, and technical support. I knew their standard password security question answers and booking preferences. I also had copies of their identification documents stored in my password manager from helping them renew their passports the previous year. "I think I can," I said slowly. "I have enough of their information to verify my identity as them to the cruise line." The ethical implications gave me pause. Was I stooping to their level by using their information, without permission? Was I crossing a line by canceling a trip that would affect not just my parents but their friends as well? "Their friends think my parents are paying for this trip," Rebecca reminded me, seemingly reading my thoughts. "They have no idea it was funded by stealing from our wedding savings. They are victims of your parents' deception too, in a way." I nodded, my resolve strengthening. And better they find out now than arrive at the port with invalid bookings, because my parents could not actually afford what they promised. The next morning, I called the cruise line, using my father's information. After verifying his identity with his date of birth, address, and the answers to security questions I knew from years of helping him with accounts, I inquired about the status of the booking. "The group booking under Reynolds is currently in deposit status, Mr. Reynolds," the customer service representative informed me. "Final payment of $23,400 is due by July 15th. I need to cancel the entire booking, I stated firmly. May I ask the reason for cancellation, sir? Perhaps we can address any concerns you have about the cruise experience. Family emergency, I replied simply. We will not be able to travel during the scheduled dates. The representative explained the cancellation policy. Since the final payment had not been processed, we would lose the deposits of $5,100. But the remaining $23,400 would be refunded to the original form of payment within 7 to 10 business days. Please proceed with the cancellation, I confirmed, a strange calm settling over me as I effectively dismantled my parents' stolen vacation. After completing the cruise cancellation, I methodically closed every remaining vulnerability. I changed all passwords to my financial accounts. I froze my credit reports to prevent new accounts being opened in my name. I removed my parents as authorized users on a credit card I had foolishly added them to years earlier. I closed the joint checking account I had maintained with my mother since college for emergencies. Rebecca and I visited our bank in person to file a formal dispute for the unauthorized withdrawals, providing documentation of the transfers to my parents' accounts and evidence of the cruise booking and cancellation. The bank representative advised us that recoveries in cases where access credentials were voluntarily shared were not guaranteed, but promised to investigate thoroughly. Finally, we consulted again with Andrea, the attorney, who helped us draft a formal demand letter for repayment of the misappropriated funds. The letter outlined the specific amounts, taken the legal definitions of the offenses committed, and the civil and potentially criminal consequences if the matter was not resolved through full repayment. This letter establishes an official record of your attempt to resolve this privately before escalating to legal action, Andrea explained. It is an important step whether or not you ultimately decide to file a lawsuit or criminal charges. Throughout this process, I maintained complete silence toward my parents. They sent occasional texts about unrelated matters as if nothing had happened. I left these unanswered, focusing instead on reclaiming what had been taken and securing our financial future against further exploitation. The decisive actions brought a mixture of relief and anxiety. Part of me worried I had gone too far in canceling a trip that affected people beyond my parents. Another part felt I had finally stood up for myself after years of being used as a financial resource rather than being treated as a son. Whatever happens next, Rebecca assured me as we mailed the demand letter, we are facing it together. Your parents created this situation, not you. You are just finally enforcing consequences. The first sign that my parents had discovered the cruise cancellation came 3 days later, a series of increasingly frantic calls and text messages demanding I contact them immediately about an urgent problem with their travel plans. I did not respond. By that evening, my father's messages had evolved from urgent requests to thinly veiled threats. This is not a game, Jason, one text read. If something has happened to our booking, there will be serious legal consequences. The irony of my father threatening legal action over the cancellation of a cruise purchased with stolen money was not lost on me. My mother took a different approach, leaving tearful voicemails, expressing confusion, and heard about why I would sabotage a special family experience. She made no mention of the $35,000 they had taken without permission, casting herself as the wounded party whose son had inexplicably turned against her. The next wave came from extended family members. My Aunt Susan called irate that the wonderful cruise your parents generously organized had been canceled without explanation. Your father is devastated, she informed me when I finally answered her third call. He had been planning this for over a year as a special treat for everyone. How could you interfere with something that brings joy to your parents at their age? Did he tell you how he paid for this special treat? I asked calmly. He mentioned investments that had done well. What does that have to do with anything? Those investments were $35,000 stolen from my and Rebecca's wedding savings account. Money we had been setting aside for over a year for our wedding and home down payment. Silence filled the line, followed by a hesitant, "That cannot be right. Your father would never." The money was transferred directly from our account to theirs 3 weeks ago, after I foolishly gave them my password for emergencies. They used it to book a luxury cruise for themselves and friends, a cruise Rebecca and I were not even invited on, despite it being marketed as a family event. Another long pause. I need to speak with your father about this." Not all family reactions were negative. My uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, called later that day with a different perspective. "I always wondered how Phil and Martha could afford to treat 6 people to a Mediterranean cruise," he admitted. "Your father has complained about money troubles to me for years, always hinting about needing loans that never got repaid. This makes more sense now." Uncle Robert went on to share that he had maintained limited financial contact with my father for nearly a decade after several loans disappeared without repayment or acknowledgement. "The thing about Phil," he explained, "is that he has always had expensive tastes without the income to match. Instead of adjusting his lifestyle to his means, he finds ways to make his problems someone else's responsibility." The family divisions deepened when someone presumed to be my Aunt Susan created a group text with various family members to discuss the cruise cancellation. In the heated exchange that followed, the full story of my parents' theft emerged with timestamps of transfers and copies of their own text messages about using the money for the cruise, serving as undeniable evidence. My parents attempted damage control, claiming they had merely borrowed the funds temporarily and intended to repay them once some investment money came through. This explanation fell apart when Uncle Robert pointed out they had not included me on the cruise, that my money was funding, and had made no mention of repayment until caught. "If Jason had not canceled the cruise, would you ever have told him you took his wedding money?" my cousin Michael asked in the group chat. No direct answer was forthcoming. The financial aftermath was mixed. The cruise cancellation recovered $23,400, which was returned to my parents' account and subsequently transferred back to us after the bank's investigation confirmed the unauthorized nature of the original withdrawal. The $5,100 in non-refundable deposits was lost, as were various booking fees and travel insurance premiums, totaling approximately $1,400. In total, we recovered $28,500 of the original $35,000, leaving a shortfall of $6,500. Our attorney advised that pursuing this remainder through small claims court would likely be successful, but would involve additional time and emotional energy that we might prefer to invest elsewhere. Rebecca stood firmly by my side throughout the turbulence, never once suggesting I should have handled things differently to preserve family peace. "Family peace built on exploitation is not peace," she said, when I expressed guilt about the rift I had caused. "It is compliance. There is a difference." The first week of no contact with my parents was the hardest. Despite everything, they had been a constant presence in my life for 32 years. The sudden silence left a strange emptiness, a mixture of relief and grief that was difficult to process. Unexpectedly, my sister Natalie became more present during this time. She called twice that week, something she had not done in years, offering perspective from her own experience of limiting contact with our parents. "The guilt gets easier," she assured me. "The freedom gets better. And eventually you realize that the relationship you mourn never actually existed the way you thought it did." Rebecca and I adjusted our wedding plans, scaling back certain elements and extending our timeline by 2 months to rebuild our savings. Friends and colleagues who learned of our situation offered support in various forms, from affordable venue suggestions to offers of professional services at reduced rates. "Your wedding will still be beautiful, my friend," Marcus assured me during a weekend hiking trip intended to clear my head. "More importantly, it will be built on a foundation of mutual respect and honesty. That is worth more than any luxury venue or elaborate catering." 10 days after the cruise cancellation, my parents appeared unannounced at our apartment door on a Sunday morning. I considered not answering, but Rebecca gently suggested that a controlled confrontation might provide needed closure. "We cannot avoid them forever," she reasoned. "Better to have this conversation on our terms than be ambushed elsewhere." I opened the door to find them looking simultaneously indignant and desperate. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, while my father maintained the stern expression he had always used when preparing to lecture me about responsibility. "We need to talk," he stated, without greeting, attempting to step inside. I blocked the entrance. "We can talk in the community room downstairs, not in our home." The community room was empty that morning, its generic furnishings and large windows providing a neutral public space for the conversation ahead. My parents sat across from Rebecca and me, an arrangement that felt oddly formal after a lifetime of family interactions. "You had no right to cancel our cruise," my father began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to tell our friends that the trip was off? Susan is barely speaking to us now." "You had no right to steal $35,000 from our wedding fund," I replied evenly. "Do you have any idea how devastating it was to discover my own parents would betray my trust that way?" "We did not steal anything," my mother interjected. "We were borrowing it temporarily. Families help each other." "Borrowing requires permission," Rebecca pointed out, "and usually some discussion of repayment terms. We would have paid it back. Eventually, my father insisted, though his eyes shifted away from direct contact. When I asked, "And how you have been temporarily borrowing money from me for years, with no repayment? You took money specifically saved for our wedding, and home spent it on a luxury vacation you did not include us in, and told everyone it was your generous treat. At what point in that process were you planning to repay us?" My parents exchanged glances, but offered no concrete answer. The confrontation continued for nearly 2 hours, cycling through accusations, justifications, and occasional moments of near acknowledgement, before retreating again to defensiveness. My father's approach evolved from righteous anger to attempts at emotional manipulation, to finally, when those tactics failed, a desperate bargaining. "What do we need to do to fix this?" he eventually asked, the fight draining from his voice. "You have made your point, Jason. We understand you are upset." "Do you understand why I am upset?" I challenged. "Because your words and tone suggest you think I am overreacting to a minor misunderstanding rather than responding to a major betrayal of trust." My mother began crying then, not the manipulative tears I had seen so often before, but deep body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from a place of genuine realization. "We just wanted nice things," she whispered between breaths. "Everyone else always seemed to have nice vacations and renovated kitchens and new cars. We worked hard all our lives. We deserve nice things too." "So did Jason and Rebecca," my father acknowledged, quietly surprising me with this first genuine admission. They deserved to have their wedding savings remain theirs. Rebecca, who had maintained remarkable composure throughout the confrontation, finally spoke with quiet intensity. "Everyone wants nice things," she said. "Most people save for them, budget for them, or accept they cannot afford them. They do not take them from their children's futures. That choice reveals what you truly value, and it is not Jason's well-being." This stark truth hung in the air between us, impossible to dismiss or explain away. The following weekend, at my therapist's suggestion, we arranged a family meeting that included extended family members. Some attended in person, others via video call. My parents sat stiffly in my Uncle Robert's living room, as the full pattern of their financial behavior was discussed openly for the first time. "This is not just about the cruise money," I explained to the assembled family. "This is about a decade-long pattern of financial exploitation disguised as family obligation." To my surprise, once the conversation began, other family members shared similar experiences. My cousin Michael revealed that my father had borrowed $5,000 for a medical emergency 3 years earlier that was never repaid or mentioned again. My grandmother expressed quiet disappointment in her son's choices, sharing that she had adjusted her will after discovering my father had attempted to take a loan against his inheritance. "I love my son," my grandmother stated firmly, her 84-year-old voice wavering but determined. "But love does not mean allowing harmful behavior to continue without consequences." By the end of the family meeting, my parents faced not only the legal and financial consequences of their actions, but social ones as well. The family support they had taken for granted shifted noticeably, with relatives openly questioning their financial claims and setting explicit boundaries around money matters. Through our attorney, we established a formal repayment plan for the remaining $6,500 with monthly installments, and the stipulation that any missed payment would result in immediate small claims court filing. My father signed the agreement with a shaking hand, all pretense of righteous indignation finally abandoned. As they prepared to leave my uncle's house, I delivered my final decision regarding our relationship going forward. "I am not cutting contact permanently," I told them, "but I am establishing a period of no contact for 6 months. During that time, I expect you to respect my boundaries completely, No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. After 6 months, we can discuss whether and how to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. My mother began to protest, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We understand," he said, and for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I believed he actually did. As they walked to their car, my father turned back briefly. "I am sorry, Jason," he said simply before continuing on. The words were inadequate to address the years of manipulation and the recent theft, but they were the first unqualified apology I had ever received from him. 6 months later, Rebecca and I exchanged vows in a small ceremony at a waterfront park near our apartment. The gathering was smaller than our original vision, but felt more meaningful for the intentional choices we had made about who to include in our celebration. My sister Natalie flew in from Boston, our first extended time together in nearly a decade. The forced simplicity of our wedding plans had ultimately created a day that perfectly reflected our values and relationship. The financial boundaries I had established extended beyond my parents to include all family relationships. When my cousin asked for a loan to start a business, I offered to review his business plan and discuss resources rather than immediately writing a check. When Rebecca's brother needed help with moving expenses, we agreed on a specific amount and clear repayment terms. These interactions felt healthy and transparent in a way my financial relationship with my parents never had. Dr. Lambert, my therapist, helped me work through the complex emotions that continued to surface. The guilt that had been my constant companion began to recede as I recognized it as a programmed response to setting normal boundaries. The anger evolved into a more nuanced understanding of my parents as flawed individuals shaped by their own histories and limitations rather than simply villains in my story. Forgiveness does not mean allowing the same patterns to continue, Dr. Lambert reminded me during one session. It means releasing yourself from the burden of resentment while maintaining the boundaries necessary for your well-being. My relationship with Natalie transformed during this period, shifting from distant cordiality to genuine connection. We spoke weekly, comparing notes on our parallel journeys of establishing healthy relationships with our parents. Her perspective, several years ahead of mine, in the process provided valuable guidance and reassurance. "I spent years being angry that you did not believe me about them," she admitted during a long walk along the Seattle waterfront. "But now I understand you could not see it until you were ready." We all have our own timeline for recognizing unhealthy patterns. After the 6-month no-contact period ended, my parents reached out with a letter rather than immediately appearing on our doorstep, a small but significant sign of respect for boundaries. The letter acknowledged their poor choices regarding finances and expressed desire for reconciliation. It was imperfect, skirting the edges of true accountability, but represented progress from their previous stance of entitled indignation. Our first in-person meeting occurred at a restaurant-neutral territory that limited the duration and intensity of the interaction. My father handed me an envelope containing a check for the final payment of their debt 3 months ahead of the agreed schedule. The gesture was meaningful, though it resolved only the financial aspect of the breach of trust. "We have been attending financial counseling through our church," my mother shared hesitantly. "We are learning to live within our means for the first time." "We sold the SUV," my father added, "downsized to something more practical." These were small steps, but they suggested a willingness to change that I had never before witnessed in my parents. The experience transformed my own relationship with money and generosity. Rebecca and I established a personal policy of thoughtful giving, differentiating between genuine assistance that empowered others and enabling that perpetuated dependency. We created emergency funds retirement accounts, and eventually, a down payment for a modest townhouse near the hospital where Rebecca worked. I began volunteering with a financial literacy program at a local community center, helping young adults establish healthy money, habits, and boundaries early in their financial lives. "The most important thing I have learned," I told a group of college students during one workshop, "is that true generosity comes from clarity and choice, not guilt or obligation. Giving should lift both parties up, not create dependency or resentment." My relationship with my parents continued to evolve gradually. We established clear parameters around acceptable topics of conversation and explicit boundaries regarding money. No more vague emergencies or unspecified loans. Any financial discussion had to include specific amounts, purposes, and repayment terms, all documented in writing. The first holiday season under these new terms felt awkward, but also freeing. When my father mentioned needing a new furnace, no one looked expectantly in my direction. When gift exchanges occurred, they remained within established budgets that everyone could comfortably afford. "It is different," Rebecca observed as we drove home from Thanksgiving dinner, but different in a healthy way. The experience changed me profoundly. I learned that sometimes the most loving action is setting a firm boundary, that family relationships should be built on mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. That patterns established in childhood need not dictate our adult relationships. Most importantly, I learned that breaking cycles of financial exploitation requires courage, but creates freedom, not just for ourselves, but potentially for future generations. By establishing healthy financial boundaries with my parents, I was creating a model for any children. Rebecca and I might have a model of mutual respect, appropriate independence, and true generosity, untainted by manipulation or guilt. As I reflect on this journey from financial exploitation to reclaiming my power, I recognize that true family support flows from love, not obligation. It uplifts rather than depletes. It respects boundaries rather than ignoring them. These lessons were painful to learn, but invaluable for creating the life and relationships I want moving forward. If my story resonates with, you know that you are not alone in navigating complicated family financial dynamics. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own journey, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary for building truly healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity in creating the boundaries that protect your own well-being.